Okay, why don't we get started anyway? You got it. You don't have to go.
No, we're good.
You sure?
Should be all right. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's go through the homework. So the first problem was to convert gallons to liters, similar to what we did in class. So we're going to prompt the user to say the starting value, and we're going to convert that to a float since we're doing things in fractionally. And we're going to ask them for the ending value, and we want to know how much we're going to increment the starting value. So we're going from gallons to liters. So first thing I want to do is to
Professor, we can't see your screen.
thank you. What's the deal? It keeps timing out. Okay, go away, TCP IP address. That's annoying. Oh, fine, it went away. All right, fine. So, okay, sorry. Thanks, Taylor. So I have three input statements to get the starting, ending, and the increment value. What I want to do is I want to just do the simple calculation. I gave you what the conversion rate was to go from gallons to liters. And I'm going to want to iterate. I'm going to want to do this multiple times. I'm going to want to do it until the starting value is greater than the ending value. So I want to, the problem I gave you, I wanted to go from 2 to 6 by increments of 1, and then another example is to go to half a gallon to 4 gallons in increments of 5. And so here in the while loop, obviously we needed to do a while loop because we wanted to do the same conversion calculation over and over again. We see the value of having a while statement because we can execute that conversion. So here's my statement that does a conversion. I'm simply going to print the word start, which is the starting value for gallons. I'm going to print that. I'm going to print 2 tab characters we learned at the end of class on Wednesday that you can insert a \T to tab in the display so you can line up columns. So I had 2 tab characters. And then what I want to do is I want to take the starting value and multiply it times the conversion rate and round it to two decimal places. And that's what I want to print out. And that's what I want to repeat, continually repeat. But each time I repeat it, I want to take the starting value after I printed it and change it and add to it the increment value, which was the value that the person typed in. And I want to do that as long as the starting value is less than or equal to the ending value. So the only other thing here is I printed a heading before I got into the while loop. Other than that, I let the while loop cycle around as many times as it had to. And note that the while loop had a test. It had an action here which printed out the conversion. And then it took the current start value, added to it the increment, and put it back in start. And this is going to then cycle around until I continue until the start value has been incremented so much that it's more than the ending value. Any questions on that? I can send you the code if you want, so you don't necessarily have to go and type this in. Is that going to be a value? You should understand this. You could have had something. Does anybody have anything markedly different? Really, I can't imagine that there is, because the test is basically going to be the same, and then what you're doing here might be a little different. I don't know, you could have assigned, instead of actually printing this out, you could have assigned this to a variable if you wanted to, and then printed out the variable in the print statement. That would have been fine. And the key here is that typically the last statement in the while loop, it doesn't have to be the last statement, but typically, for me it is that I'm going to change one of the variables that I'm testing, so that at some point in time the test is going to end. If I never changed either the start or end in the while loop, then this while loop would go around infinitely. Okay, I hope everybody got it. Let's see if this works. Okay. So the next one was somewhat similar. Actually, it's remarkably similar. Here we're computing some depreciation table. How many of us are accountants in here? Okay. How many people have not heard the word depreciation before? I made that assumption. Okay, great. Everybody had heard depreciation. And so what we're doing here is we're computing a depreciation schedule. And what we want to do is take a value of something and continue to depreciate it by, in this case, I fixed it. I didn't input, there was no input here, by 4,000. So we have some asset that we're starting at 24,000, and each year it's been depreciating by $4,000. And what we want to do is we want to show what the ending value at the end of the year of that asset is after it's been depreciated, and then the total amount, the accumulated depreciation. That's that last column. So what we're doing over a number of years, in this case I said we're doing this over, strike that. I don't know the number of years. I want to do this until the asset is fully depreciated. So what I've done is I set up a bunch of variables. And I'm going to have a year, because I'm going to be printing out 4 columns, a year, the amount of depreciation, the ending value of the asset, and then the amount that we've been depreciating. So here I had depreciation. I could have set it equal to 4,000. And I want this depreciation schedule, I want now this thing to loop around for as long as there's value. And so the variable EOY value is going to initially be set to 24,000, and each time through my loop, I'm going to take EOV value and reduce it by how much I'm depreciating at, 4,000. So I want to continue to do that. I want this loop to continue to run until the value of EOY value is less than 0. So my test here is, okay, when EOY value is greater than 0, do this stuff. When it's less than 0, exit the while loop. So I printed my heading up here, and notice that I tabbed things. I put dashes and tabs. I don't care if your thing wasn't all that pretty. You should understand the tab character. And then what I did is I printed out the year, how much I'm depreciation, the value at the end of the year, and then how much has been accumulated. And then in my loop, I'm simply going to change the value of each of these variables. I'm going to increment year by 1. I'm going to depreciate and take the EOY value, It's the asset I'm depreciating it and reduce it by depreciation. And then I'll take the variable ACC DEPR and increase it by the depreciation, and that's the accumulated depreciation. And then the while loop, again, all these statements, because they're indented, are executed in the while loop. And this will run until EOY value is less than 0. Oh, Nick?
Since the problem specified it would be 7 years, is it all right to make the while loop for like the year?
Yeah, I'm not happy. You read the problem. What are you doing that for? So you're right, it said for 7 years. So you did it, you just did it, you increment, your test was testing on year when we, yeah. You're 100% correct. From an accounting point of view, it's more interesting to see when this thing would have died, when the asset would have been fully depreciated. But you're right that it should have been for 7 years. Okay. Okay. And then,
for like DBA, for this, you would have to have like the print after the rest of the equation changes. Is Python like different where?
well, your name again is?
Dan?
Dan. So effectively, Dan, this is going to print out the first year.
Okay.
So when we run this, let's run it. So it's printing out. Note that the end of Y value is what I started at, 24,000.
Okay, yeah. So it's the same.
It's exactly the same. I just printed the first year out.
Okay.
We're good? So here, this prints, so this is going to print year being 1, because that's what I initialized it to, and depreciation being 4,000, and this being 24,000, and this being 4,000. And then year is set equal to 2, this is set equal to 20,000, this is set equal to 8,000. And when I come back the second time, then it's going to print out 2, 4,000, 20,000, and 8,000.
Yeah, I just did it where I started at year 0, so that like the print statement was underneath everything.
Got it. That's fine. You got the same result.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, sounds like you guys sort of got the hang of the while. That's good. We're going to do some more with it. Let's do the last problem. That was a more interesting problem. So, I found... Okay, so here, so I'm going to have a variable called ending, which is going to be the ending digit that we're looking for. And what I want to do, of course, is to print out the values from 1 to 20. And then if the value in 1 to 20 ends in whatever they ask for, then print it ends in. Okay, so seems to me, okay, so when I'm attacking this, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to have some counter that's going to start at 1, and I'm going to go, that my counter is going to go while counter is less than or equal to 20. That seems to be my loop. And I know that and I sort of do things this way, and I know at the end of my loop, I'm going to set counter is equal to counter plus 1. I sometimes put that in there just to make sure that I have my increment. So now, okay, so I've sort of set up the skeleton of my loop. I know I've got to go through this 20 times. And so I've created a variable that's going to control that. And now I've got to test to see if counter is, if the last value in counter, if the ending digit in counter is equal to whatever ending is. Okay. So how did you guys test for this? So, yeah?
I did an if statement. I said it,
Counter.
counter. If counter divided by 10 equals ending, then I said print number ends in ending digit, or ending in your case counter ends in ending, and I said.
Wait, say this again. So count is equal to ending. You did that? You divided counter by 10. I thought I heard that.
Yeah. I did the percentage sign to get a dot, the decimal.
You did this.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see what. And this worked, right? Anybody else do this? Oh, very good. Good, Megan. So what did you got? What's the percent? What is the percent sign? So Jordan whispered it.
Dividing it, but getting the remainder.
Right. And so if you remember, that's called the modulo operator, but that's great. I don't care what you, I'm thrilled that you remember to use it. I don't care if you remember what its name is. But in this particular case, it's a stupid problem, but I just wanted to show you sort of the value of this modulo operator, that it gives you the remainder, and that this worked perfectly for this, right? Because that's all you are interested in. You're interested in dividing by 10 and finding out what the remainder is, because that gives you the last digit, right? So if counter were 4, what's 4 modulo 10? If you divide 4 by 10, what do you get? You get 0 with the remainder of 4. If counter were 14 and you did 14 modulo 10, what do you get? You get 1 modulo 4, so it gives you a 4. If counter were, this is only going up to 20, but if counter were 24, again, when you divide it by 10, you get a remainder of 4. So the modulo operator here with 10 gives you then lops off the last digit, and then you're golden. Very good. Jordan?
I didn't think to use the modulo.
No, that's fine. Wait. So this is a great solution. It is not the only solution. So I just want to go through other ways of handling this. But does everybody get this? Nick?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Any questions on this? Just, as you solve these things, when you see different usage of these functions, you sort of put them in the back of your mind of ways of attacking it.
No, it's definitely like the best way to do it though, because like it's the least amount of lines. This is like
It's sort of elegant to do it this way. It's really what it's asking for. But okay, Nick.
Oh, okay. So I also had an if statement. It used 2 ors, but basically it was if the counter, or I used num, minus the ending was equal to 0, or if the counter minus the end digit was equal to 10, and then in case someone used 0, I did the same thing, equal to 20.
Oh, crap, okay. Equal to this, what, so you did counter minus ending, what would that be equal to?
10, and it's all in the parentheses.
What the hell? Oh, this thing's gone batty, okay, or, okay, so, hold on a minute. So if counter were equal to 14, I'm looking for 4, 14 minus 4 is 10.
Right.
Okay, but what about if counter equal to 4, 4 minus
And then
4 is
that-
equal to 0?
Right, equal to 0.
So then you did the same thing here.
Yes. And then I would have one more equal to 20, just in case someone put in 0. That way, it would still equal 20.
Put 20 in where?
I had another or statement, having equal to 20, in case someone put 0, then it would return 10 and 20 at the end of it.
So you did this.
Right.
But you just said if this is counter is equal to 20?
At the end, like,
That?
right,
I see, because if they put in 0.
it wasn't the same.
Okay. It's pretty good, Nick. So I think effectively you're doing modulo. I think you're doing by subtraction, you're getting the remainder.
Right.
Okay, you would get full marks. But you would admit that the modulo is,
Yeah, I didn't think it would.
yep, no problem. I mean, I spent 5 minutes on it. So, good?
So, I kind of stared at this. I knew I had to do modulo, but I don't know, for some reason the number wasn't coming to mind of what to put on the other side of modulo. So I made an if statement, of course, but before that, I made my count, I turned my count into a string.
Okay, this is good. So let's say so Jordan said, let's take counter and turn it into a string, right? So you did this too, Chris?
Yeah.
So, and I'm thinking that, okay, so let's go on, Jordan.
And in the if statement, I said if count brackets -1 for the.
Well, it's going to be string 1.
Oh, in my input, yeah, and you got to turn input into a string. I didn't in my input. I actually like didn't put in.
Actually, yeah, right, you could have just done it as
Yeah.
a,
I knew I was going to do it this way, but for this, we're going to have to make it a string and then turn it back into an integer, maybe. I don't know.
or you could have just had it as you could have just had
Yeah,
this as an
I just took that
integer.
out.
So Jordan just had them enter it in and didn't turn it into a number. Then he said, watch this, so then he said, if string 1, go ahead, bracket,
-1.
-1, so what he wants is the last character. So he needed to turn the number into a string because that would be the only way to use the indexing here to get the last character, and then he said if that's equal to ending. And that works too.
Yeah, and you can't forget. I think I made sure, yeah, you can't forget to turn. Oh, no, and then you just made another variable count. Yeah, I turned it back into an integer. I should have made another variable for it.
You could have done it right.
Yeah.
No, you have to turn, well, I turned it back into an integer because the wall counter.
But I'm not doing, I made a new variable. I didn't change counter into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does everybody see that? So anybody else do it this way? So Jordan and Chris said what they really wanted to do is they wanted to get the last they wanted to get the last character, but the only way they wanted to get the last number, but the only way to do that is they had to turn the number into a string, and then if they did that, then they could use this -1 to get the last number. But in this case, it wasn't a number, it was a character, so they simply, when they read this in, they read it in as a character, and then they tested it. And that's great. And just as an aside, guys, Does everybody understand their motivation here? So they wanted to make use of this. And in order to make use of that, they had to turn their number, they used the string function to turn their number into a string. And you do that a lot in programs. Oh, gee, I wish I could use that, but that only works if it's a string. And they said, fine, I'll turn it into a string. Okay, and in fact, guys, so you could have done the following. Yours is right. I just want to show you that this is possible. I could have actually said, now say, apply the string function to counter. That turns this into a string. And then take the last character of it. So you didn't have to create another variable. You could have done that all in one statement.
Oh, and that's only in the if statement. It'll only be a string within the if statement.
Right, so very good, Jordan. So Jordan was saying, gee, you're turning counter into a string, but no, it's only doing it temporarily within the if statement. It has not really changing the value of counter. So since it appeared in the if statement, it is not turning. The string function, first of all, doesn't change counter. The string function simply returns a string. So in no case would the string function change counter. But you could have, if you wanted to, as a shorthand, simply applied the string function to counter and then take off the last value. Great, okay. So any other questions on this or any other comments? Better ways to do it? Okay, so let's take a look at, let's learn more about the while and other ways of using the while. Okay, so suppose we had the following problem. Suppose we want to write a program where we're going to read in 3 grades. We're going to prompt the person for a grade, they're going to type it in. They're going to prompt person for a grade, they're going to type it in. They're going to prompt person for a grade, they're going to type it in. And what we want to do is we want to write code so that we print out the average of those 3 grades. So sample interaction would be enter grade 70, enter grade 80, enter grade 90, and then you're going to print out the average grade is 80. That's the interaction. So I could write the code to do that. Which would create a variable called counter and create a variable called total grades and initialize those to 0, and then prompt the user to enter in a grade, and I put it in a variable grade, and then I take the grade and add it to total grades to find out, because I'm going to need to compute the average, I'm going to add up all the grades and then divide it by the number of grades, and so I put that grade in total grades, and I increase the counter, the number of grades that I have, by 1, and I simply repeat those lines, those exact lines, 3 times. And that would prompt the user for those grades. And then after I've done that, now I've got the total of all the grades in the variable tot grades, and now all I need to do is to now calculate the average by dividing the total grades by the counter, and let's say rounding it to 2 decimal places and then printing it out. And that would give me the functionality that I want. But of course, that's pretty dopey to do, or, because it would cause me to repeat these same 3 statements 3 times. So is there a way to accomplish the same functionality without having to write this much code? And obviously it would seem that the while statement would be able to help me do this, because I'm doing the exact same thing 3 times. And the while statement provides for allowing the same statement or statements to be done multiple times. So why don't we first try to write this so that we're going to run this code so that it will run 3 times. Let's change what we did here. Instead of doing this, to now take these lines of code, and instead of having to type in this 3 times, now let's convert this. This should not be a problem for us now, to convert this to now make use of the fact that we can have a while. So I could have while counter is less than 3. I think that's right. Enter the grade, add it there, and then so for those of you having problems understanding why you would use a while statement, if the homework didn't help, hopefully this will give you more insight that here we're doing the same statement 3 times, the exact 3 statements 3 times, and instead of having to do it 3 times, obviously typing it 3 times, doing copying and paste is not that big a deal, but suppose I want to do it 100 times, or I don't know how many times, then that would be a big deal. That all that code now can be consolidated to have those statements only repeated once by incorporating that in a while statement and testing to make sure that the counter is less than 3. Now, does everybody agree that my test here is correct? This will, you'll get it wrong. I think I'm right. Is that the right test, counter less than 3? I want it to run 3 times. It should be what? So Chris and Jordan think it should be less than or equal to 3. So counter is equal to 0. If I had a nickel every time I've done this when I've written code, I wouldn't be here. So counter is equal to 0. So is 0 less than or equal to 3? Yes. So I prompt for the first grade, and counter is now equal to 1, right? So I've gotten 1 grade. Now counter is 1 less than or equal to 3, yes. I go get the second grade. Now I've got 2 grades, counter is equal to 2. Is 2 less than or equal to 3? Yes. So I get the third grade, counter is not equal to 3. Is 3 less than or equal to 3? Yes. So now I get the fourth one. So it's not, that's not right. Right. If I would have had counter set equal to 1, okay, everybody watch. Okay, you're going to make that mistake. I actually can tell what profession a person's in by sort of asking that question, because you've done this so many times. You're off by 1 when you're setting the loop, and you either do, and the key is whether you're doing less than or greater than, and the equal sign, whether you want to get that last one. So if it was 1, then it would have been less than or equal to 3, but I started at 0. So, okay, minor. Does everybody get it? Okay, this. Everybody should be comfortable with this idea. Now, what if I want to change this code to now not make it 3, but make it a number that the person tells me? So the person, when this program is going to start, my interaction is going to change, where now it's not going to be enter in a grade. We're going to say and they might type 5, And then that loop is going to now run around 5 times, right? So now instead of fixing it at 3, we're going to ask the person how many they're going to have. And I don't know what that's going to be. It could be anything. So now if I'm going to now allow the person to tell me how many they're going to enter, how am I going to change my program? Surya?
Can you just turn total grades into an input instead of setting it to 0 to start with?
Not total grades. Total grades is adding the grades
Never
in.
mind, you can create a new variable.
Right. Let's call num grades. So now I know the number of grades. It's not going to be equal to 3, but it's going to be whatever they type in. And so now how else am I going to change my program? Nick?
Well, counter is less than or equal to the num grades.
So now instead of hard coding it in, now it would be less than num grades. Does everybody see that? So now I'm able to manipulate my while statement. Everybody get it? Okay. Now, 2 more ideas here. So this is harder. So now I'll stop. Can I keep on going? Okay, now I want to change my program to do the following. I don't want to burden the person with having to know how many grades they have ahead of time. So, they've got this list, and they just want to keep pounding them in. So now what I want to do is I want to allow them to enter in a grade, but when they're finished entering in the grades at the same prompt, instead of typing in a number, they're going to type in the letters STOP, which would indicate to me that they want to stop entering in grades, and now they want to compute the average. Get it? So why don't you guys take a few minutes and see how you might change this code. It actually is going to take a fair amount to change it to get that behavior. So you don't know the number of grades, but you know that when they're finished entering in the grades, they're going to type in the letter stop, and that means they've stopped entering the grades, and now you can compute the average. Okay, so anybody got any ideas? I copied in the input statement. So this is harder. Turns out I think it's just a rearranging of the statement. So we want to prompt the person in the loop each time, but if they type in the word end, or stop I have here, then we want to stop. So let's just take a look at this code, and now instead of counting counter number of grades, what do you think my stop condition is going to be, or my non-stop condition is going to be?
While grade is not equal to stop.
This is actually going to be grades here. Why don't I have grades? While grades, so I'm going to enter in a variable into grades, and while that's not equal to stop, then, right, we're going to loop around, they're going to be typing in a value, and we're going to be putting it into grades, and as long as it's not equal to stop, then I don't want to stop. So in the loop, I'm going to have the same thing here. Note that since they're going to be typing in the word stop, I really can't apply the int function to it, because if I take int of a string, then I'm going to get an error, and what they could have been typing in for grades could either be a number or stop, so I can't apply the int to it. And, well, let me write the code here. So I think what we want to do is grade. So let's see how this is going to work. So I'm going to read a value into grade. I'm going to test to see if it's not equal to stop. If it's not equal to stop, I'm assuming it's a number. And so what I'm going to do is, since grade was an integer, was a string, I need to take the int of it to convert the string of digits to a number, add it to total grades, increment the count, and then prompt them again to get grades. So it seems like now this loop will work, right? I have a grade, I add it, I convert it from being a character string to a number, add it to total grades, increment the counter, and reprompt them for a grade. And if they type in stop, then when we come in here, is grade not equal to stop? And when they type in stop, we're done. But if they type in something besides stop, we assume it's a number, then we're going to convert that value from the string to an int, because all we used to do before is we used to do this, and now instead of doing that on the input statement, I'm simply doing that when I'm referencing grade, because I can't do it here because they might have typed in the word stop, and if I took int of stop, I'm going to get an error. Surya?
Well, would that work? Because grade isn't defined.
Very good. So everybody see that? Grade's not, Surya's not happy because he said, wait a minute, grade's not defined here. And I can't reference a variable unless it's defined. So how am I going to remedy that? It's a simple fix. Jordan?
Just grade and just quotes
Well,
outside the statement.
I couldn't do that, so, oh, that's very good. Okay, so let's go through some possibilities. So Jordan came up with an idea. He said, fine, it has to be defined. Let's simply say, let's lie to it and say grade is equal to double quote. So now grade's defined. It's nothing. Is grade not equal to stop? Everybody watch. Is grade not equal to stop? It's not, so fine. So I'm going to get in the loop. Int of grade is 0. Right, so this is nothing. So if I do int of nothing, it's going to yield 0. So total grades is now going to be equal to 0. Counter is going to be equal to 1. And now I prompt them for the real value. Now they enter in 71. That's equal to grade. And now I come back, is 70 not equal to stop? It's not. So I then take the int, add it to grades, increment counter by 1, and then scroll around. So does that work? Does that work? Almost. What's the problem?
I don't think that it'll turn into 0 when you.
Oh, it will. No, here, this will be 0. It'll do that. The string of nothing will, the int of nothing will give you 0. So that's not the problem. Okay, so let's go through this. What if the person typed in 70 and then typed in stop? So now I come in here, grade is, okay, grade's nil. So now total grades is equal to now 7, is now going to be 0, right? And then counter is going to be equal to 1. It's weird. Right? Because I went through the first time, grades nothing, is nothing equal to, not equal to stop, it's not equal to it, so I take the int of grade, which is 0, add it to total grades, which is 0. Now total grades is still 1, but I'm incrementing counter is now 1. Now they say enter the grade, now the person types in 70, they type in this number. Is 70 not equal to stop? It's not, so now I take 70, add it to grades, and so now grades is equal to 70, that's good. And now what do? Now I increment counter's not equal to 2. And now the person, now I hit this statement, and the person types in stop. So grade is now equal to stop. Is stop not equal to stop? That's false. So now I exit the while loop, and now I come here.
Well, there's 2 ways you could solve that.
Okay, so what's the problem?
Why? Well, you could just make counter -1 if need be, but why can't you put the input statement above total grades?
Okay. Stop. Okay, so he solved it twice, but does everybody see what the problem is? The problem is when I get out of there with what Jordan first suggested, he actually had the solution in his head. He was just being polite and didn't tell me. But using this solution, the problem is counter's overstated. Counter's now 2. I'm going to now divide total grades by 2, and that's wrong. So there were a couple of remedies for that. Jordan could have said, okay, fine, just then say counter -1 here, because I'm overcounting by 1. That would have been one remedy. The second remedy that Jordan had is set counter started that equal to -1 instead of 0. I don't like that one as good. The other one, the traditional solution, is the following. Instead of setting grade equal to this, just repeat the input statement. So you would have taken grade, and when you've come in here, if the person typed in the first grade, then you would have considered it. So if they typed in 70, then you would have gone around, you wouldn't have had this, you would have had 70, and counter would have been equal to 1, and then they would have typed in stop, and then you would have exited. So almost as a template, I hate giving you guys templates, but if you had to write a loop where you don't know how many you want, and you're going to have this terminal sentinel value that they're going to type in, like stop or end or something, then this code where you prompt them for the value and you say type in some value to end it, and you test for that value that it's not equal to it, and then you do the calculations, and notice we're doing the prompt at the end here. And the only thing we had to do different is we had to take the int of the grade. Okay, I'm going to give you one more of these. I'm trying to give you a feel for how flexible the while statement is depending upon how you do the test. You should understand it. You should be able to come back here and sort of then say, okay, fine, I know how to do it. I understand I'm throwing this at you fairly quickly. Any questions on this? Do you want me to go through it again? Remember, I'm posting this. You can always go back and look at this. You can always go back and look at the video. And I'm posting the slides, too. Yeah, good. Okay, so let's go through this, and okay, so we have the variable counter, the variable tote grades, and the variable grade. Okay? So first time through, counter is 0, tote grades is 0, and let's suppose the person's entering in two values, 70 and 80, and then they're going to type in stop. So when we come to this statement here, they're going to type in 70. Okay? So now the variable grade is going to be equal to 70. Is 70 not equal to stop? True. Great. So take grade, which is 70, it's actually the string 70, turn it from a string into an integer. The int function turns a string into an integer. So this is really this. But I can't do arithmetic on that. So what I need to do is pass it to the int function, which is going to turn it into a number. The number 70, add it to total grades, which is 0. And so now, after I do this and then put it back here, this is equal to 70. Agreed? And now I'm going to set counter equal to 1. I reprompt, and now they're going to type in their second value, 80.
If they have a second value.
If they have a second value. Let's just go through they have a second value. So they type in 80. Is 80 equal to stop? No. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to turn that into a number, add it to this, to 150. Increments counter. Counter's now 2. And now they're going to type in stop. That's what they're doing here. So grade's not equal to stop. Is stop not equal to stop? That's false. So therefore, we don't go into the while loop. And we exit, and now we take total grades, which is 150, and we divide it by counter, which is 2, to give me 75.
So without the stop, we just continue to go.
Yeah.
Moving through.
Wouldn't it? Because this is saying only continue to do these statements as long as the value in grade is not equal to stop. If they would have misspelled stop, you would have gotten an error. But assuming they typed in either numbers or the word stop, it would continue forever until they typed in the word stop. And it should be clear to you why that this code gives you that functionality. Yep.
So what I'm confused is what we changed to how we were getting an extra counter before. How does putting the grade equals info out there fix that?
Because, Surya, when I had this, why did that cause an error? Because now when I'm going through the loop, I'm incrementing counter, but they haven't really entered a grade in. Right? Jordan was right. He said, I have to initialize it to something, so he put nothing into it. And that avoided getting the error, but then it had the side effect of overcounting counter by 1. By putting this in here, we're actually entering in the grade. Okay? It's a pain in the neck point, but again, it's just off by one thing. Okay, one more cool idea. Okay. Let me go back and bring up the other program. Okay, everybody watch this. We're going to be using this idea a lot. And it's not so intuitive. So this is the old way that we did the program, where we asked them to enter in the number of grades. Okay, so this is the simpler way. This is where they're typing in the number of grades to average. They type that in first. And then our for loop simply says, do that, counter is less than number of grades. We're not having this word, they're not typing in the word stop to stop. They just said, I'm going to enter in 40 grades. They enter that in. That's num grades, and now our while loop is going to cycle around 40 times. Everybody should be good with that. Now, when you do commercial programming, when you actually are programming for people to use the program, one of the things you spend an enormous amount of time doing, and it's a pain in the neck, but it's absolutely required, is you've got to do error checking. That is, you've got to make sure that the value that a person is typing in conforms to what you think they're typing in. In this particular case, I've said enter in the number of grades to be average and make sure that the value that you're entering is between 1 and 100. But is it possible, either by a legitimate fat finger, someone hits a number that they type in -3 for the number of grades, or they type in 200, and they type in an invalid value? And the answer is, of course, that's possible. And it's incumbent upon us as programmers to say, well, they can do that, and now I've got to catch that error and tell them, no, that's invalid. I want you to give me a real value. I've got to then ensure that the value in the variable, that the value they type in is between 1 and 100. How can I do that? Well, oddly enough, we can use a while loop to do that. Now watch this. So what I want to do is, I'm prompting it for a number of grades. I want to make sure that the number is greater than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to 100. And if it's not, I'm not going to go away until they type in a value between 1 and 100 inclusive. And so what I can do is I can write a while loop that says, I'm going to make this shorter so you can see it. Now check this out. So all I did is I repeated, I could have changed this to another statement, but I wanted to make a point here. I just repeated the statement here and I included a while. So check this out. So the person, I prompt them for a value. What if they typed in the value 200, which is something that is not a legal value because I want the value to be between 1 and 100? The way I can ensure that the value is between 1 and 100 is after the input statement, put a while and test to see if the number is less than 0 or if the number is greater than 100. What I'm testing here are the endpoints. And if they violate either of the endpoints, if they put in a value less than my lowest endpoint or they put in a value greater than my ending point, what happens then? So what if they typed in 200 in the first prompt? What is the program going to do? Nick?
Just going to repeat the statement.
Because num grade 200 is greater than 100, right? So this is true. So therefore I execute the while action. The while action is to reprompt them. It's the exact same statement. I probably should say you made an error, please re-enter. That would probably be nicer. It's just the prompt. And now they type in a value. Right? They type in a second value because they made a mistake. They typed in 200. They didn't read the instructions. Now they type in another value. What if they type in 97? Well, they type in 97. Num grades is equal to 97. Is 97 less than 1? No. Is 97 greater than 100? No. Therefore, this is false. And therefore, I fall out of the while loop and come here with num grades equal to 97, which is a value between 1 and 100, which is what I want. Let's go through this again. What if they come in here the first time, they type in 200? 200 is greater than 100, so therefore this is true, and therefore I reprompt them. Let's suppose they're trying to be smart about it, and now they type in minus 67. So now num grades is minus 67. Is minus 67 less than 1? That's true. It has violated my number, and therefore this is true, and I reprompt them. Let's suppose the third time they go in and they type in now 101. 101, num grades is now 101. 101 is greater than 100, and therefore this is true, and therefore I come back in here. So the moral of this story is that they cannot get out of the while loop until they put in a value between 1 and 100. This simple idea of using a while statement and then just repeating the prompt is a way I can validate input. And obviously I can do this anywhere that I want. Try running, when you go home, try running this code. You're going to see that you can't get out of this while loop until you put in a value between 1 and 100. And obviously, I control what the range is based upon my test here. And the way I set up the test is I'm testing to see if it violates, and I don't necessarily have to have two ranges here. I have two values, a lower range and an upper range, and I could have just had one. But I test to see if it's less than the lower range or it's greater than the upper range, in which case it's violated the value that I want, and I'm going to put them in the while loop and reprompt them for the value. What is the homework? Okay, does everybody see it? Okay, this looks screwy, I get it. So the only way I can get you to learn it is by actually having you do it. How am I actually getting you to do it? It's on that friendly white piece of paper in front of you called homework. Once you do it, I swear to you, once you write this code for doing validation once, you're going to say, I get it. Reading on the board, you guys now sort of have an idea of what it's doing. Well, let me restate. Does anybody have a question? Does anybody want me to go through it again? I'm happy to do so. You're just testing to make sure that the value they typed in is within the range that you want. If I were asking for a particular word, suppose I said, okay, enter in the value A, B, or C, a string. Would I be able to test for that? Could I have a validation for that? And the answer would be yes, because here I would simply be saying if it's not equal to A, or it's not equal to B, and it's not equal to B, and it's not equal to C, then you want to do it. I think it's and. Yes, because it could be any of those. So this test is going to make sure that it fulfills the validation. So we learned that we can use the while to now have as many values as we want by having that stop value at the end or whatever word you're testing for. And another good use of the while is to be able to validate a number that's being put in to make sure that it's within the bounds that you want. And the great thing about this is that once I've put in this validation, the rest of my code knows that anytime it sees the value num grades, that value is going to be between 1 and 100, because there's no way to get out of this unless you type in a value between 1 and 100. Okay, so that's it for today. Once you start, if you can, take a look at the homework sooner than later. It's going to exercise this. You have any problems, just send me your code and I'll get back to you. Okay.